Christian from the Community Brew Shop here with a real special treat. If you want to get right into the bulk of the interview with Richard from Escarpment Laboratories, check the timestamp below. I've got a little bit of a preamble. So we did this interview back with Richard before Christmas when we were still in an orange phase of COVID restrictions here in New Brunswick. Derek and I tried to sit far apart during the interview to make sure that we were being safe and following local guidelines, but unfortunately this caused some issue with my camera. So I thought about releasing just the audio from the interview or putting it up as a podcast or something like that, but it really would have done Richard a disservice because when you watch the interview and you can see his body language and his mannerisms, he's obviously very passionate about his business, and we're very excited to be a partner with Escarpment Laboratories at the shop. So take a look. I edited the video a little bit so that you can see Derek and I's face, but not so much the wonky video that came along with it. But really, we talked about everything from home brewing to how the company gets started to how home brewers can propagate their own wild yeast. So it was a really great interview. We were really excited about it, and we hope you enjoyed as well. Okay? Cheers. An interview with Richard from Escarpment Labs. He's just up on the screen there now. Hi, Richard. How you doing?
Hey, guys. I'm doing well.
Good. So my name is Christian from the Community Brew Shop. This is Derek. And at the shop, we just recently started carrying Escarpment Labs products in the store. And Richard was kind enough to give us an interview so that we could share his story and his company's story with all of you. So I think I'll let Derek take the first question and we'll get started.
How's it going, man? Good to see you. So, yeah, I had some time to look at your products. I kind of am in charge of the whole ordering process, that kind of thing. So just wondering a few things. I guess from a homebrewer standpoint, what kind of advice would you have for someone who's looking to get into like, simple yeast ranching at home? I know Christian and I, we kind of experiment with a lot of things. Like I have a plum tree out in the yard. We stole yeast off that. We forage for berries. We do a little bit of that stuff ourselves, but really, the stuff sits in our fridge and then we use it when we can. We don't really ranch it properly. So, I mean, kind of for myself, but also other home brewers that might be looking to get into, yeast ranching, if you have some advice there.
Yeah, so I think that's really important, right? Yeast management is really one of the ways that brewers can kind of take their brewing and their beer to the next level. Whether it's keeping a wider range of strains on site and getting to know them really well. I see a lot of value in brewing the different beers with the same yeast and learning what it can do. So it's really important to have that skill set of being able to take care of the yeast, reuse it. What I would suggest is and maybe it's a bit of a plug, but I would suggest start with a great yeast, right? Start with a yeast strain that's been selected for great performance and that has been lovingly propagated and taken care of, in that propagation step. And then, take care of it from there. Make sure that it gets the food it needs, gets the nutrients and oxygen that it needs. And as long as you take care of the yeast, that's really half the battle, right? Is keeping the yeast happy, and then you can be more successful with yeast ranching and home yeast management. One thing that a lot of folks do that I think is a smart idea is even if you're getting the yeast pack that has enough yeast in it, taking that and making a little starter and then saving a bit of it before pitching it into your beer, so that you're saving a little bit of the starter each time is a really good strategy to keep really good quality yeast between batches, so you don't have to worry about harvesting your yeast like top or bottom cropping from a fermenter. You can just save a little bit of the starter and use that batch to batch, and that works really well. And then once you're comfortable with taking care of some of the commercial yeast, then you can get into things like the wild yeast capture out in the wild, from fruit and trees and all sorts of places where yeast can be found.
Okay, so we wanted to start here just for people that do their own yeast harvesting here, but with a company like Escarpment, what kind of equipment and processes do you use that kind of takes it to the next level and allows it to be made available commercially? And of course, you can keep any trade secrets or anything like that to yourself for sure.
Yeah. A lot of it's really not that different. Of course, if you need to scale up a propagation to 2,000. Some of our biggest propagations are 2,000 liters. So at that point, you're not on a stir plate, right? It requires different equipment, but the basic principles are the same, right? We're taking a yeast culture, we're feeding it with oxygen and nutrients and sugar, and letting it grow and paying really close attention to it. And really, I think that's where a lot of the difference comes in, is that the yeast culture that's produced in the lab has eyes on it pretty much all the time, right? Yeast doesn't sleep. We have to pay attention to, what the yeast culture is doing at every step of the process. The whole propagation process is pretty highly monitored. There's a whole lot of things that we're monitoring. There's a whole lot of data that we're collecting to make sure that the yeast is grown the way that we intend it to, so that it performs the way that we intend it to. So that's really a big difference. And of course, once you're getting into these bigger propagations, more than a liter or two, it's going to look a little bit different from what you might do at home on a stir plate. But the mechanics are very simple, similar.
Okay. So we carry some of your blended yeasts in the store, and we have sold a few, and we've gotten some good feedback on them. But I guess with the blending process, that's something that Derek and I haven't done with the wild yeast that we've used in some of our own brews. So how do you determine what yeast you use in the blending process, and what kind of steps do you take to ensure that you get an outcome that you like, I guess?
Yeah, like figuring out what yeast work well in a blend is often really just a product of trial and error, trying a few different things and seeing what works. So some of those products like the Saison blends, for example, it's really the result of home brewing and trying different combinations and seeing what works, what doesn't, and turning those successes into products that are available. For most of the blended products, we grow them. We grow the different strains up separately and then blend them when they're packaged. Just because for a lot of those things, the yeasts have very different growth rates, so we can't really just grow them all in the same propagator, or else the ratio will be pretty out of whack. The only exception is the Kveik yeasts, which thankfully all of those blends do grow at the same rate, so we're able to propagate the whole thing in one one tank, one propagation, which is really fun. They tend to work really well together.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I just kind of was curious, some of the yeast you guys have there that you've harvested from the region. I'm from the London area originally, London, Ontario, so I'm familiar with Niagara Falls and the Escarpment area and stuff, but I was just wondering, what kind of flavors do you find that you get from the local yeast that you harvest there that really stand out in a beer, and kind of what type of beer would you suggest that we, could kind of make with those type of yeasts? I know you have a little bit on the package there, but I'm sure, like you said, you've been doing some experiment with home brews and stuff, so I'm wondering your take on the whole thing.
Yeah. With the wild yeast, which, luckily yeast is everywhere. Wild yeast can be found in a lot of different locations, especially places where sugar is found. So fruit and trees, and tree bark, for example, is a place that yeast likes to hang out. So we've been able to capture yeast from the wild around here. I wouldn't necessarily say that it's hard to prove that you're going to get totally unique flavors from one specific region, but I will say that wild yeast are often really interesting. They're often some of the most extreme yeast in terms of what they do, right? In terms of things like certain flavor production. For example, we have a blend called Ontario Farmhouse Ale Blend, and it's a blend of Saccharomyces and Brettanomyces, but that Saccharomyces strain is makes extreme amounts of banana aroma. So you get some of these really cool combinations with some of those wild yeasts that can do really interesting things in beers. In general, if you kind of look at what the wild yeasts do, they often are pretty fruity. They often are. They have those sort of phenolic Belgian aromas. It often means that they fit in really well with the Belgian styles. And if you look at the types of yeasts that a lot of the Belgian brewers are using, those yeasts are less domesticated. They're a little bit wilder. They have those, those spicy phenols. They have those really strong fruity aromas that some of the other more domesticated yeasts have kind of lost. So I would say if you're, capturing a wild yeast or trying out one of the ones from us, the first place that I would usually start is some kind of Belgian style, right? That tends to work really well with those kinds of yeasts.
Okay, I recently tried out the English Ale 1 in a peanut butter porter recipe, and it was fun because it was the first time I brewed a porter with an additive like the peanut butter powder. But Derek's suggestion, I use the English Ale 1 because one of the flavor profiles on it is strawberry. So I thought if I can get a strawberry jam porter going on here, I think that'd be peanut butter and jelly porter. I think I'd be pretty happy with that. So.
That's funny because, on our side, we joke that packaging that yeast is like packaging peanut butter because it's so thick.
Yeah.
So I think it's very fitting.
When I took it out to brew that day, I just brewed last Saturday with it, and we have an assortment of yours, and all our yeast is kept at a fridge at my place for the store. And a lot of the yeast is, you pick it up and it's very clearly like water in a bag, basically, right? Yeah. But that one was thick, and I was really concerned at first that that I had froze it or I had mishandled it, but it took right off, and it was very aggressive, and I got a lot of early fermentation off it. Just even 20 minutes after pitching it. So it was. I'm glad it was stored properly, and it looks like it's going to work out well for me. So. Yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah, some of those yeasts are kind of like toothpaste once you get them into the pouch. So for those really chunky like English yeasts, you can kind of give it that like toothpaste roll and get all the yeast out of the tube that way, and that works pretty well.
Pretty much what I did, yeah. So glad I did it right. That's good. I haven't been brewing as long as Derek, so the whole time I was like, oh, am I doing something wrong here? But no, it seems like it's working out really well. So. Mm-hmm. So can you tell us a little bit about your own homebrewing experience? Like, did you start as a home brewer or did you start more from an educational, like from your university studying or anything like that? Like, I guess what led you to, starting with yeast, propagating yeast, and then eventually building a business around it?
Yeah, I did start as a home brewer. In the middle of university, I moved in with a guy who was doing some home brewing, and I got curious, and the first few homebrews were really not good, but I felt compelled to push my way through and try to make it better and try to learn as much as possible, and didn't really know what a deep rabbit hole I was getting myself into. I mean, the world of brewing and homebrewing is so vast. I just really got into homebrewing and got into experimenting with yeast. Like I was going to school for microbiology at the same time, so learning a lot of these techniques that you can use to maintain yeast cultures and grow it up. So it kind of just sort of worked together very serendipitously, getting into homebrewing and then also getting into microbiology, and myself and a few other students at Guelph. We realized that we had this shared passion for brewing and homebrewing, and some of these skills in some of the lab techniques. So why not put it together and start a business? And that's essentially how Escarpment started, as a way to experiment with yeast and trade yeast for beer with the local breweries.
So are you still brewing, or does the business keep you too busy?
I'm still brewing. I still try to, whether I should or not, I still try to prioritize brewing as much as possible, because I think it's really important to test the products and know the products, have experience with them. So, I really enjoy I really enjoy brewing with our yeast. I really enjoy doing, collaboration brews with commercial breweries as well. Just last week, I did a brew with our production manager, Evan. We made a dark mild with English 1. So, very same toothpaste yeast. That was a lot of fun. I've never made that style before. So that was really exciting. And it's, it's cool with a yeast that's that flocculent, it's really cool to make a beer that's crystal clear in 5 or 6 days. That was a lot of fun.
Awesome. Okay.
I guess, what do you see for trends coming like this year with yeast? I know like Kvike is big right now. Do you see that kind of continuing on, or do you see, people turning back to Brett's, or what do you think is the kind of, the way things are looking right now?
Yeah, I mean, Kvike is big and it's a big world. I think there's still a lot of opportunity there to explore, and we keep exploring it. We have our Kvike Ring program where we try to release a new Kvike product, a blend or a single strain, every month when possible, and that's really exciting because it also gives us a chance to test these things out um, at a rate that we might not otherwise be able to. I mean, we have more than 300 Kvike strains, isolates in our collection now, so it's become a pretty daunting task to figure out what all these things are capable of. But yeah, I mean, beyond that, I think there's a lot of cool stuff happening. And that's not only including Escarpment, but including a lot of the yeast companies. There really has been a push for innovation in the last few years, and we're seeing a lot of really interesting products coming out. Yeast Labs, trying to create yeast that may otherwise not have existed, right? That do things that other yeast couldn't do before. Whether that's through things like genetic modification or through crossbreeding, stuff like that. So, for example, we just released our first hybrid yeast that we call Jotun, and that's a hybrid of Kvike and a saison yeast. So that's a combination of yeast that's never existed before, and we were able to create that, and it has some properties that are pretty interesting to people. It's a yeast that performs like a saison yeast, but it flocculates, so it makes a clearer beer. It can tolerate really high temperatures, just like Kvike. So it has a lot of things going for it, right? Being able to ferment a saison at pretty much any temperature, have it flocculate out, make it a little bit easier to turn that beer around faster. I think that's pretty exciting, and I think we'll see a lot more of that kind of stuff coming on, like ourselves included, and other yeast companies just inventing totally new things that offer new flavors or new properties to brewers. So I think the next couple of years are going to be really exciting. Like even just looking at our product roadmap, I think there's going to be a lot of really cool things for people to try out.
Okay, when you look at your product roadmap, do you kind of match it up with what trends we're seeing in both commercial and homebrewing production, or do you? I mean, you guys are scientists. Do you go on kind of that mad scientist angle and just say, let's try this and just see what happens, right? Like, I guess obviously there's a business perspective to be had there, but I just think some of the blends you have are already so interesting. Like, I'm just kind of wondering what your thought process is when you're like, okay, what are we going to develop next?
Yeah, it's a bit of both. I would say half of our products are things that are very intentional, right? We're hearing some signal from customers that we really need to offer this kind of product. Crispy was an example of that, right? We had a lot of people asking about Kvike yeast for super clean beers like pseudo lagers, and we didn't have a product offering for that. So we pretty quickly developed Crispy as a solution for people who wanted that option, right? A yeast that can make a super clean beer in a super short amount of time. But then some of the other things are things that we kind of just stumble into, right? Like that first hybrid, the Jotun, we were really just seeing if we could make some hybrid yeast. We had never done it before, so we did a little project last summer and said, okay, let's try this. Maybe they're all duds, maybe they're not. Let's just see what happens. So yeah, we often do a bit of both, and both approaches can work, right? We've had so a lot of very happy accidents over time, and
That's great. Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Crispy, because we do have some Crispy in the shop, and when we first put them on the website, the Escarpment products, that was one of the first ones that we had inquiries on, and from a buddy of ours who brews both home and commercially here in St. John. It was one of the first ones that he was like, oh, you got this one in. Like, I've read a little bit about it and stuff. So I think that's definitely one that you guys definitely hit a chord with that one. So it was good. Yeah.
absolutely, yeah, that has far and away been the most impactful new product this year.
Okay. Okay. So we're just kind of winding down now, but I don't think I can end an interview without asking the standard, how has COVID impacted your business? As I mentioned before we started recording, that, we're very lucky. We have a, mostly online presence, and we mask up and stuff, and we make deliveries. But for a company like yourself, that, is much larger, and, you have already some logistical challenges with shipping cold products, or products that should be cold across the country. Like, did you get impacted by COVID? How did it, how did it impact, especially where Ontario was hit so much harder than we were out here on the East Coast? So,
Yeah, we've definitely been impacted by it, but I would say, we've got a really great team who's, always willing to adapt to change. And I think that's been a key for us is the team's willingness to adjust how the business works over time, especially as the situation changes and continues to change, right? Like, especially thinking back like March and April, May, when there was so much uncertainty, it really came down to the team, making decisions as to, how are we going to operate in a way that is safe for ourselves, that's safe for our customers, and, that's safe for the health of the business. What can we do to, ensure that we can continue to offer the level of support that breweries expect, and stay in business. Luckily it was a pretty busy summer in terms of beer. Like craft breweries were definitely making and selling a lot of beers. So
Yep.
That went well, but then that created an opposite challenge where, we had some enhanced safety measures in place, and then suddenly demand was higher than it ever was. And, we had to address that challenge. So, luckily, we had already been in the process of building out our expansion space. And so I would say that if we were still operating in our original space, it would have been a much bigger challenge. But since we were able to get our expansion space up and running in June, it's been a lot easier for us because we've been able to spread people out. We've been able to do everything Escarpment needs to do, and even add capacity this year, while doing what we can to keep everyone safe. So I don't know. So far, so good. But it really comes down to the team finding a lot of really good solutions to make everything work.
No.
And also it comes down to the way that the business has changed too, with with COVID and especially with the lockdowns. We've seen a pretty big increase in homebrewing, and we really welcome that. It's really cool to see the homebrew shops doing well, and and people getting into homebrewing, because I know that was on a bit of a decline for a little while. So it's great to see that interest, and it's totally necessary because most of the innovation in beer comes from homebrewers. So we really need these communities.
Well, as homebrewers ourselves, we really appreciate the kind words. So, anything else you want to ask, Derek? Or
Yeah, I guess I had kind of three questions. So 3 quick ones. Maybe you'll have to think about them. But I guess the first one is, what's your favorite Ontario beer right now? Second one would be, what's your favorite yeast strain you have? And the last one, Christian and I have been thinking about brewing a beer for Christmas, and we have one of your Kvike ring yeast on hand here. We're thinking about using. So, what would you suggest that we make with that strain?
a little bit of a lightning round at the end, I guess.
Okay, that's okay. Favorite Ontario beer right now? I just had a beer from a great little brewery called Son & Hill. They're in Caledon, not far from here. They make a lot of lagers and saisons. That tends to be what they focus on. And it was they just released a Pilsner called Ziegler. It comes in short cans and has this nice orange label. It's a German Pilsner. It's really, really delicious. Highly recommend it. Along those lines, my favorite strain to work with right now is our Beer Garden Lager yeast. I just really like the results that it gives. I really like brewing lagers. I like the challenge of it. I like that, as a scientist, I like that pretty much every decision you make, every variable you change has an impact on what you get out. And I think Beer Garden is a great strain because it's really responsive to those changes. You can get, really different results from it depending on how you treat the yeast and how you make the wort. And for your Kvike ring, which Kvike ring release was that?
I think you're sold out of it now on the website. I forget which one it is now, but Midbust, I think it is.
Yeah. Yeah. So Midbust is a Kvike from a place called Stordal. That is a blend of a bunch of strains. It's definitely on the fruity side for Kvike. I think that one, because it has a lot of these sort of like plum cherry kind of aromas, I think it would be really well suited to like a darker beer, like a stout. I think that would be the best fit for it. We haven't done it. We had talked about doing like a smoked porter with it, for example. I think that would be a pretty good combination.
Okay.
Oh yeah, the porter's one of our favorite styles to do, and we've done a few. We've done some blended, and we've done some additive ones. So that might be right where we're looking to go for it. So
we have some we can age too. Maybe make a batch and age it for 3 or 4 years. Have one at Christmas every year.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing that you can put some Brett into and secondary as well. So
yeah.
Awesome. Okay, well, Derek and I both really thank you for your time this afternoon. We're very happy and proud to be, working with you and keeping your products on our store shelves. And we wish you and Escarpment all the best in 2021.
Likewise, I'm looking forward to working with you.
All right,
man.
Thanks a lot.
All right. Cheers. Thanks, guys.